You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Are you a diehard comic book collector?
Or maybe a lapsed fan?
Maybe even someone who has never picked up a comic book in their life. Hi, I'm Remso Martinez.
And I'm Mark Claire. Every single Wednesday at the Second Print Comics podcast, Remso and I take a deep dive into the storylines, character arcs, moments, and events that made us the fans we are today.
Tune in every Wednesday for new episodes available on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever else podcasts are available.
Check out more from the Second Print Comics podcast at secondprintcomics.com.
Prepare yourself. You're on the run with Remso W. Martinez.
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Today, you wanted more talk about UFOs, extraterrestrial phenomenons, all the crazy stuff coming from the skies that we can't really determine, and we don't know whether or not the established narratives we're getting from the government and other academic sources are really the truth of what's going on. Why do I say all this? Because it's a complicated thing, but we spoke about it back in January with good friends Gary Collins and Brian Nichols, and you all thought, hey, this is worth continuing. So I went ahead and brought on somebody that talks about this regularly. You know her as Jess Rogge from the Rogge Report. Jess was born and raised in Southern California. Growing up, she talked about aliens and UFOs, and it was commonplace in her household. From a young age, she developed a fascination with anything and everything paranormal. And as a teen, she started to become interested in conspiracy theories, something that, is basically everything online at this point. It used to be something we shied away from a few years ago, and now everyone believes something that some of us would consider kind of out there. But hey, the more you question, the more you learn, right? Anyway, her thirst for knowledge and drive to discover the hidden truths of the universe and led her to pursue a degree in broadcast journalism and television. Jess realized quickly that the mainstream news environment was not the right fit for her truth-seeking style of reporting. She's a news reporter for the Fringe FM, where she reports on fringe topics. A self-proclaimed geek of fringe topics, she has dedicated the last 10-plus years of her life researching the hidden facts behind alternative topics in the news. She loves to cover subjects relating to the paranormal and conspiracies, with the UFO phenomenon being her main and first love and focus on her show, The Rogge Report. Ladies and gentlemen, Jess Rogge.
Jess Rogge from the Rogge Report. Thank you so much for joining the program today.
Thank you so much for having me, Remso. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So your show is one of my guilty pleasures. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I don't listen to many other podcasts within my field of like travel, politics, commentary, that type of thing. When I want to disconnect, this is when I go into the more esoteric topics. I start listening to stuff about the supernatural, the paranormal, extraterrestrial type of stuff, because it's one of those things where, especially being kind of a digital creature, being a social media contractor, I spend so much time online and I spend so much time just kind of narrowly focused on things that live and die by seconds and controversies and stuff like that. I often have to pull myself out of it and really, remember what are the big questions in life? What are the big things that we're looking at in the world? What are the things that are important, or at least they're important in my opinion, that I feel we don't give much thought about? And at the beginning of the year, I had a few friends of mine on. We did a panel just to kind of change the pace of things about a lot of the UFO reports that had come out from the Department of the Navy and DoD in 2020, a year that will live on in infamy. And I had two basic reactions. Either people were like, dude, go back to talking about other weird stuff. This is too much for me. Or people that were finally like, Remso, thank God you're finally woken up to the weird shit that's going on in the world. And, right now, it seems that the way that we're talking to each other and the things we're talking about online, I don't want to say it's more Puritan now than ever before. I don't want to get political about this, but, social media companies, news outlets, they used to, have a pretty open mind to a lot of things. Then it started clamping down political speech. Then it started clamping down on really anything that went against what I would consider established narratives. And when it comes to the realm of the extraterrestrial possibilities, when it comes to aliens, UFOs, and that type of stuff, a lot of information came out from very, establishment sources in 2020. And this is one of those things where it's like, this isn't a partisan issue. I mean, if there's somebody out there, if there's somebody here who's not of this planet, and if there's stuff outside of our, comprehension when it comes to technology that can, be a potential threat to us, that's something I kind of want to know about. So my first question is this. You cover a lot of these topics on your podcast. I'm going to go ahead and link to that in the show notes. What's it been like coming into 2021? Do you feel that people have had more of a renewed interest in this? Or are you getting a lot of new people who are like, I have no clue what the hell you're talking about, but I'm in it for the ride? What's it been so far?
It's been, and I can even take it back maybe even 10 years ago. I mean, even further about how this has ramped up, because I've been around the this whole UFO thing for quite a while. So I've watched as it's changed over the past year, and even since 2017 and even since 2020. You have so many more people into UFOs now. I mean, even if you go back, what was it, last year, the year before, we had Storm Area 51, which was kind of a pop culture-y thing.
I was working at the Washington Times at the time, and I tried so hard to get them to fly me down there to report on that. That was one of the biggest regrets of my life.
I know I didn't make it out there. I live in Southern California, and it was probably a 6-hour drive. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I wish I did.
Same.
But I think that was kind of another thing that kind of pushed it forward, that whole movement. And a lot of people were like, yes, there's UFOs. Yes, there's aliens. And I think now versus me talking to somebody even 2 years ago till today, somebody, just a normal person that doesn't have a lot of beliefs in UFOs or anything, but they're more likely to bring it up now.
And I mean, for me, what really did it was the Tic Tac video.
Yes.
That was one of those things that I brought up on the last episode I did, like back in January. And, I think Joe Rogan made that a little bit more popular when he brought on the Navy pilot who had captured it. And then Captain Fravor, Commander Fravor, that was it, Commander Fravor. Commander. Yeah, and when, the Department of the Navy put out those documents basically saying, yeah, whatever that thing is, that's not man-made. We give up. Like, that was one of those things where it's like, okay, I need to accept the facts that we don't know what's going on, and that in and of itself is an answer. And I mean, this is one of those things where a lot of political commentators, when they jumped on it because they can't not shut up about everything, even when they don't really have anything to add, they were jumping on in 2020, and like Republicans were saying, well, this is a giant distraction from the election. And then Democrats were saying, oh, well, the Trump administration released it to distract from how he's poorly handling COVID. And I'm just kind of sitting back watching this. I'm like, okay, if you both are blaming each other, saying that this is something to ignore, it kind of makes me want to pay more attention to it.
Right. And it's made me wonder, and I was on a show the other day, and I asked this. I said, well, why now? Why the push now?
Why do you think?
I try to sit there and I think about it, and I say, well, why the push? Okay, so why, if we've known about UFOs since, the 40s of last century, and, we had the Condon Report in the 60s, which was basically done to ask, are UFOs a threat, not if UFOs exist. So even back in the 60s, that report said, no, UFOs exist. So here we are, X amount of years later, and we're still like, do they exist? Well, they've told us several times, we don't know what they are, and we don't know what the threat is. So my theory, just based on kind of what I've been looking at, and this could be totally wrong for all I know, but if they push it, and they push these reports in the government so that they can get funding, because they can get more funding to research the UFOs or UAPs or whatever they may be, because really a benefit is whatever country can acquire or reproduce this technology basically could rule the world in warfare.
For people that are not necessarily familiar with your show, I mean, what is the intent? Do you believe that all this stuff is real and you're trying to convince other people, or is this something you're interested in and you're pursuing these topics just because you want to get to to whatever the truth is? Because I feel like for some people within your category of programming, what I don't like are the people that are so dead set. They look at everything and think, oh, those are aliens. Oh, that's a conspiracy. What I like are the shows where it's like, I'm interested in this topic and this is an important topic because either people want to avoid it, either people refuse to talk about it, or it's something that, deserves a little bit more time and effort than just what we're going to give it when, it shows up on the news for 5 seconds.
I think because of my background, I went to broadcast journalism school, and that's where my background is. I also do the news for the Fringe FM 5 nights a week. So my background is journalistic. So I approach things, I think, more from that standpoint. I know there's something out there. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm simply, bringing on researchers, different specialists in the field so that people can see, hear these people share their information and their evidence and help people to, make their own decisions and start to research it themselves. I try not to speak in definites because I don't know either. I've been researching this for a long, long time. And I think the more I research it, the more I don't know.
That's an interesting. No, I mean that's an interesting way of putting it. I studied religion and politics in college, and I thought that I was going to learn a ton of stuff, which I did. But by the end of it, I just came out with more questions and more dead ends than I had when I started. With UFOs and extraterrestrial life specifically, what sparked that interest in you? Because I feel like for everybody, typically it's one of two things. You saw a movie and then you were wondering, oh, well, I wonder what the possibilities are. Or it was just one of those questions that popped up. Because, I mean, for me, I've always had the general interest looking up in the stars thinking it can't just be us. And, over the years, it always got to the point where it's like, I need to see some more evidence. And I mean, for me, like many other people, that Tic Tac video last year when, and I think it came out a few years prior, but last year was when 2019.
2017.
2017 was when it popped up online. Now I remember. Yes. Yeah. So when it came back in 2020, because of the Department of the Navy report basically saying we have no clue what was going on, for me, that was all the evidence I needed, because for them to come out, because they were basically forced to, for them to basically come out to the New York Times and say, we have no clue what's going on. For me, that was just the point where it's like, I don't know what it is, but what I do know is that's got to be something.
Yes. And I think that's kind of where we are, where it's like there is something going on. What it is, we don't know. Perhaps the government knows more than we know, just simply because they've been studying it longer and they have longer records than any individual or any group.
Definitely. So what was that moment
my moment, sorry. My moment. I don't have this great moment that changed it all for me. I'm not an experiencer. Like, I've seen lights in the sky, but I don't know if it was UFO. But for me, I think it was because I was into the paranormal, I was into conspiracies, and I was into UFOs. And the most tangible thing that I could put my hands on in this whole thing with so much evidence was UFO and UAPs. And I think with also, like I was saying, with the government research, that there was so much research done by our government and other governments. To me, it was something worth looking into. And I think that's what kind of sparked that. And here we are today, I guess.
Why do you think this is a topic that, gets lumped into conspiracies and all that other stuff? Because, it's one of those fields that even, top academics are looking into when it comes to the UFO phenomenon, when we're discovering, new things about the universe, such as, bacterial life on Mars and stuff. I almost feel like while it's treated as a pseudoscience, it's gaining more and more legitimacy every day. But when it comes to most conversations, the moment people want to start bringing up, UFOs and aliens and that type of thing, they usually just get the side eye, or at least I usually get the side eye from people.
Yeah, and it's true. And honestly, too, I mean, within the UFO community, too, there's extremes. There's the very, like, I tend to be more on the nuts and bolts kind of side of things. But conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, you have very spiritual beliefs related to the UFOs and the alien beings, too. So there's this huge spectrum, too. And within that, too, how the conspiracies tie into it is that there's been cover-ups, right? Since the UFO sightings, there's cover-ups. There's there's rumor, there was the rumor of Area 51, for example, that it was and hold on, let me take a second back. Area 51, it wasn't released that was actually a thing until, I don't know, the 90s or early 2000s. But it's been around so long now that we think it was known, but it wasn't known prior to that. Or not known, but confirmed by the government.
And this is one of those things where, I think this is why I try and avoid politics as much as I can, because as soon as that's brought into it at all, it's almost like, the talking points are already there. But this is something that regardless of administration, that regardless as to who is necessarily in power of what branch or whatever, this is something that pops up all the time. It's almost like there's a mutually beneficial interest in trying to keep this stuff as quiet as possible.
Yes, and so then it makes you ask the question, why are they keeping it quiet? But then, which brings us right back to, well, why now?
Do you think there's a specific reason why they chose when they did?
I honestly don't know. I don't know why now. Because I mean, I kind of figured something was going on when Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo and the other gentleman left to the Stars Academy over the summer. And then this whole thing started happening. So it's like it was set up and it was coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, part of me at the time, and we're specifically talking about the Tic Tac report and everything. When that came out, we're talking about it in like April, May, so about a year ago today, in the middle of one of the weirdest years ever, where we've got murder hornets and COVID and the lockdowns and all this other crazy shit like the Tiger King phase and riots and that all type of stuff. And then they put this out, and there were two schools of thought. One, that it was completely independent of all of that they just put it out because they figured that was the time to put it out. Then there's what I saw online where people were saying, well, the news cycle is so crazy right now, the best thing to do is to put it out there so that way it gets buried. And then at that point, we can kind of ignore it because we can say, well, we already gave you all the information you wanted. Now we have to go ahead and jump onto all these other things.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see the theory and the thought behind both of those. It makes sense. Like if they didn't really want people to pay attention, release it while things are really crazy. But on the other hand, too, you kind of think, well, if the government, they have lots of checks and balances, they have a lot of bureaucracy, so maybe it was already in motion for it to be released at that time.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where the more you kind of think about it, the more rabbit holes you can kind of get into. I am curious, for you to be convinced of something, what are usually the criteria you're looking at for you to look at a situation or look at evidence and think to yourself, okay, I genuinely can say that I believe this is factual and I believe this is correct information? Because that is one of the problems I see online amongst different forums and different online communities talking about these topics, because it's like everything has to be a conspiracy. Everything has to be fully loaded. Everything is always the government's fault. And it's either these people are, completely, super geniuses who have all this kind of mapped out and planned out. And then you've got the other camp where it's like, well, they're freaking morons who can't do anything. How can we even rely on them to be truthful about it? What are some of the criteria you look at when you look at these situations?
I don't know. When I look at these, I guess I look at the sources of the information. I look at who's saying it, how often it's being said. You know, faceless, anonymous internet users, it's harder to believe what they say versus, you know, an article. But then even then you have to be careful of the sites that you look at too, because what looks like a news site may not actually be a news site as well, you know. So I'm going to probably dance around this because it's very hard to discern. And part of the problem nowadays is we're just flooded with information. So for me, it's really just being able to discern what it's real, what seems factual, because too, I mean, and this is a big problem. We cannot even believe what we're looking at anymore. I mean, when it comes to photos and even video now.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that really bothers me because it's like, how can we have deeper, bigger conversations about topics as complex as UFOs and extraterrestrial life when we're debating, you know, things like the Biden green screen, for example.
Yes.
That is one of those things. Now, I want people to know where I am on this stuff. I'm not a fan of President Biden. I didn't vote for him, but I don't think everything that happens out there is a giant plot. So when I first heard of the green screen incident from a couple of years ago, where people were like, "Oh, you know, the helicopter sound is disconnected from the actual time and location, and it looks like you know, the microphone, he's moving his hand through it." Originally, I thought, okay, well that seems like a lot just to fake a quick conversation with reporters. Like, that seems like a lot. So from the beginning, I was just kind of like, this seems kind of ridiculous. And it seems like, you know, for a lot of people, they just kind of jumped into one camp or another. It's like, if you don't like him, it was an absolute green screen and he faked it because he's dead or a hologram or something. And then if you love him, you were going to go ahead and defend him every which way. And I looked at it as somebody that's not a fan, and I was just kind of like, you know, I think this is just a bit too weird. And that's the way I'm going to describe it. It's just too weird. And as I looked at the situation and as I actually listened to reports from, you know, videographers and people that do, you know, special effects and stuff like that, they're basically like, listen, there's a rational reason as to why they put out their reasons. And as I look back at the video, I had to admit, this is not a green screen. This is just a weird, you know, movement of the camera and, you know, the lighting and other stuff. It's not what people are claiming this to be. And it's one of the situations where then I go to my friends and I'm like, well, guys, I don't think it's a green screen. And suddenly, well, what if it is? Well, did you look at this? And who are you talking to? Well, they're in bed with them. They're all working together. And I'm like, this is, it either is or it isn't. And it can't be everything you want it to be at the same time.
You know, it's hard. And then it is really hard to look at things and discern whether they're real or not because of things like that. And then we have all these, what do we call them? Internet sleuths now that are going to sit there and break every single bit of it down, but not really have any knowledge of it. And, you know, when you bring up, like, you know, talk to video specialists and then they can tell you, you know, what's going on or why this looks like this. So I think a lot of the times too, it's like when people, you have to be careful when people start to make assumptions when they don't really know, I think too.
What are some of the things in the UFO field that are typically red flags for you? Because for me, one of the biggest, and some people think that this is their biggest body of evidence, but for me, you know, I've met several people who say that they have either been abducted or encountered UFOs. But for me, I've never necessarily been convinced by that. So that's an entire, you know, supposed body of evidence, these eyewitness accounts that a lot of people jump off of. And, you know, I use the same application for other things. It's like eyewitness accounts aren't always reliable. Even if a person believes they saw what they saw, there's so many things going on that can influence their memory and stuff like that. You know, it's like, how can I believe that somebody has been, you know, abducted and had these moments when we're arguing about stuff like the Biden green screen? Because I know it sounds like I'm kind of running from place to place, but, you know, I think all of this is linked to the question of, you know, are we capable enough of even having these types of conversations?
It's very difficult to say, you know, and, you know, within the UFO community, you know, it's general, you know, we allow experience, for me at least, I allow experiencers to talk. I do not talk to a lot of experiencers or abductees on my show. That's more something I do privately. So it's, you have to believe the experiences that, not that you have to, but I respect the experiences that people share with me. Do I necessarily believe them? I think that's, I, it's hard to say. They had some sort of experience. Was it an alien abducting them? I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like you don't have to believe everything they're saying, but you can believe that they believe it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I do not speak to a lot of people, a lot of experiencers or abductees, because I don't know.
What are some of the things that have changed how you have viewed this field over the last couple of years, particularly? Have there been any stories or any moments that have really impacted your view of the UFO phenomenons and everything?
I think being involved in the field, you come across, things that you come across people or things that aren't right. I guess I found there's a lot of frauds. I find that there's a lot of people who are trying to profit. There are a lot of people who, and I think that to be honest, that made me want to stop being, even associated with the field a few years ago. I was tired of it, and I said, I want to move on to other topics. But then, the Tic Tac video happened back in 2017, and it drew me back in. Prior to that, I was more of a believer, and now more of a skeptical believer, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I totally I get where you're going with that, because like for my other show, The Witching Hour, it's a paranormal investigation show. And of that, it became one of those things where there's just so many things at play. It makes it, it makes it difficult to really know what you believe anymore, because we got some pitches from Discovery and History Channel, I think, in 2017, 2018. And we thought, oh, this is going to be us moving into the big leagues. We're going to be able to talk about all of our discoveries and stuff. Well, part of the problem is part of the pitches came with they were going to be scripted. We weren't going to be paid. And we had no editorial oversight over what we were going to do. And we're like, well, that's not how we do things. And they're like, no, but that's how we do things. So then you start to think it's like, all these programs where you think that things are going on. And I'm not going to point out one or the other, because I don't genuinely know who is messing around and who is taking it seriously. But that was one of those moments where it's like, God, does everything I believe a lie now?
Right. I see that. Yeah. And I think that's also just part of the whole paranormal field too. It's like there's these people, that want to share the truth and the evidence, but then there's the showmen that are there to make money.
Yeah, and I apply the same thing for like a lot of people in the UFO field, because I believe that for the people that are actually putting in the work, actually doing the research like yourself, for me, what really discredits it are the, as you call them, the experiencers. Yeah. And that's one of the issues I have, because I take that type of mindset to everything. Like, you can never just go off of eyewitness testimony. You can never just go off of what one person said or what he said or what she said, because, this is already such a fragile field, both the extraterrestrial field and both the paranormal field. Like, it's already so like fragile that, one moment of distrust or one fraud or one moment where it's like, you can completely discredit yourselves and others. That's enough to take somebody who was willing to believe you and completely turn them off from ever listening to anything about this again.
Exactly. That is 100% the truth.
What are some of the things, especially going into a new administration, we're already several months into the Biden administration, that you're hoping maybe him or some of the bureaucrats do in order to possibly, give us more insight into this? Because I ultimately hope that whoever is president is going to see this stuff and think, okay, now is the time to talk more about this. And I feel like for most sitting presidents, they never really talk about this stuff until after they leave. I mean, Ronald Reagan spoke about it. Bill Clinton spoke about it. The only people who haven't really spoken about it were George W. Bush and Barack Obama. I'm hoping that, even though he's not on Twitter anymore, maybe Trump will one day be like, okay, you guys want to know what's going on now? But I also just don't think he's going to do it either. I mean, do you have any hopes that we'll get anything from this current administration?
I don't know, but I feel like where we're gonna get the information from is gonna be from the Pentagon. It's not gonna be from a sitting president. Maybe he'll come out and he'll say like, yes, I can't do darn it, no Biden impression.
Come on, man. We're talking about the thing.
Biden. I'm Biden. Joe Biden.
The thing, man. The thing.
Hey, man. This is bad. I thought
this is the cold opening now.
Oh
no. The thing.
The thing. Show them the UFOs. I mean,
back in Scranton, we call them neighbors.
Sit out on the porch and look at them all night.
Y'all telling me that wasn't normal?
What would be awesome is if Biden just comes out and just tells his UFO story.
I mean, that would be a good start.
You know what? Here's my theory. I think we would need a sitting president who had an experience, who had witnessed a UFO to really want to champion this.
I would want any sitting politician to do this, because I feel like the ones that have the credibility and have the name recognition, they always do it when there's really nothing to lose. Like Barry Goldwater, for example, in Arizona, where I'm originally from, he was a notorious UFO hunter after he left the Senate. And I mean, Harry Reid, I'm not a big fan of Harry Reid from Nevada, but my God, if Harry Reid wants something done when it comes to this type of stuff, I'll support him, because he's one of the only leading advocates for declassification of UFO documents from DOD and other departments. So it's like, this is the one area where it's like me and Harry Reid are 100% on the same sheet of music. But he didn't really do, I mean, he talked about his last couple of years in the Senate, but now he talks about it, and now he'll go on documentaries. Now he'll go on, History Channel and other places and talk about it when he's in his least useful position. It's like private citizen Harry Reid can't do shit for us, but Senate Majority Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid could have done it.
I feel like a lot of these people, no, they don't. I think there's a reason for that too. It's because until they're done with their career, they don't feel comfortable talking about it because of the stigma surrounded with it, surrounded by. Yep.
I almost feel like now though that things are just so weird, and I can't say that we've lowered our bar of what we're willing to believe, or if we've raised our expectations for how weird things can get, but I almost feel like that could be a campaign like platform, like reelect me and I'll declassify all this stuff, or reelect me and we'll go raid Area 51 together. Do you think it's become even an inch more socially acceptable?
I think it's become slightly more socially acceptable. Just slightly. I think just because people were locked at home for a whole year, I think that helped too.
It's like 1 minute they're eating Cheetos in their sweats for 60 days straight. Next, they're like, maybe there is life out there.
Yeah, there has to.
Maybe I want to believe.
I mean, we had an increase. I mean, there was a measured increase of sightings, but, I have to also say that, the theory is that whatever sightings are always, they're always occurring. It's just however many people see them. But so they say the number reported last year was higher than previous years simply because people were home.
I've got a story. About 4 months into the pandemic, I had started working remotely. One thing I wanted to start doing was I wanted to start going on more walks during the week. And I live in Northern Virginia. You know, I'm about 20 minutes away from a battlefield. We've got a lot of beautiful nature around us. And what I didn't realize was that 20 feet from my mailbox in a forested area was actually a 15-mile hiking trail. And I have lived here since 2008, and I never knew that.
Wow.
With that said, the hiking trail is beautiful. I love it. But
That sounds amazing.
it had to be the most weirdest of situations where everyone is stuck at home, forced to work. There's nothing fun to do. So it took all of that to finally show me, oh my God, there's a hiking trail literally outside your front door. I almost take the same logic and I apply it to a lot of the people in the past year who started seeing stuff. It's not that, you know, it just suddenly appeared. Like the hiking trail did not just suddenly show up. Apparently it's been there for like 20 years. But it's another situation where it's like, you know, maybe a lot of this stuff was happening or maybe there's a logical explanation, but because we never intentionally looked around and disconnected from all the distractions and actually took a big wide look at the things around us, that suddenly we saw something that could otherwise be normal and we thought it was strange.
Yes. So I guess
That sounds so much more philosophical when I say it out loud.
It does.
What it basically shows is that I don't know where the hell I live.
Oh, well, right. That's that's the moral of the story.
That's the big takeaway. That's all that matters.
That's the takeaway. I had a point, but I think that's the important takeaway. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I did have a point, but I lost it, so I guess
Shit.
darn it.
But yeah, I mean, to kind of help you get back on track, I mean, I think that maybe because we wanted to look for something, we were willing to find something, even if it had always been there.
Exactly. And I think even just, you know, I can't speak. I mean, I can speak about other conspiracies, but I've noticed in just my regular, normal, everyday friends who aren't into any of this, that during the pandemic, they were a little more conspiracy leaning than they had been previously.
I could totally see that because, like, you know, I've got my like what I consider like white collar conservative political consultant friends who still associate with me. They're suddenly looking at me and they're like, dude, what if the CIA sold crack to black communities? And then I've got my more left leaning friends who are the Bernie bros. And they're like, guys, like, what if the big corporations putting out, you know, the LGBT rainbow across their Facebook profile, what if they're not really friendly to us, and like what are they doing in Saudi Arabia and stuff? So it's like everybody started questioning everything, and whether I agreed with them, you know, a majority of the time or not, I was just kind of happy that it's like, oh, good, they're waking up.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we could talk about UFOs later, sober.
Right. Oh, no, it's true. Oh, your philosophical thing. Perhaps this was my point. So perhaps we needed to get society to a point, say with the lockdown, in order for them to be able to see something that was always there. So it needed to happen. And this is the perfect right time for the UFOs to be released, or the UFO documentation to be released.
Like we were being conditioned for it.
Exactly. Perhaps it needed to be at the right time. I don't know. Theory. I don't know
At this point, I'll believe anything and everything when it comes to this, because I am one of those people. It's like I'll never trust who's president.
Yeah.
I'll never trust the established narrative. But what I will never trust is something that's too much of coincidence. And whether that leads me down like the conspiracy rabbit hole, I'd rather be questioning than just take it at face value. And I think that is the biggest benefit. It's now that people are willing to question things that they wouldn't otherwise beforehand.
Yes, and I think that is really important. Yeah, people are able to question now, so I think that is good, and I'm glad that that's happening. You know, because it's as much as I'd like it's just everything normal on the surface, you know, the everyday world where you go to work and everything. There's a little more going on in the world than we can see normally, you know.
Definitely. Well, Jess, we've got to run in a minute, but I listen to your show regularly. I think everyone should tune in if they want to go ahead and expand their mind on this topic. How can they connect with you? How can they learn more?
You can find me on all social media at the Rogge Report. That's ROGGE. And you can listen to my show live Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific on The Fringe FM.
Perfect. And folks, I'm going to make it easier for you because I love you. I'm going to go ahead and leave every link and social media site, all that jazz in the show notes today. Jess Rogge, thank you so much for joining the program today.
Thank you so much for having me, Remso.
Folks, it costs you nothing, but it means everything to me. A 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you listen to podcasts across Al Gore's amazing internet. Lets people know the fun we're having, the conversations we're enjoying together, and so much more. Helps us expand this conversation for us to go coast to coast, nation-wide. Global domination is the focus. As always, thank you so much again. I'm Remso W. Martinez. You're listening to On the Run. Be safe, be good. Good night.
You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com, like The Chris Spangle Show, Liberty Explained, The Brian Nichols Show, The Boss Hog of Liberty, Freedom Strips with Keaton Tucker, On the Run with Remso Martinez, Gingerarchy with Tricia Stewart-Mann, Upward, Libertarian Activism, and now hear this. Tune in now and we're going to help you sound smarter when talking with your friends.